So I'll be talking about the evaluation of proptosis in brief. So proptosis is defined as a forward movement of the globe in relation to the skull, measured by protrusion of the apex of the cornea in front of the
Louder?
outer orbital rim. So the normal values include 14 to 21 millimeter with an average of 16 millimeter. The value of more than 21 millimeter as an absolute reading or a difference of more than 2 millimeter is considered as significant. Before knowing about proptosis, we need to know what are the conditions that can mimic proptosis, which is called as pseudoproptosis. Like in this case, if there is an increase in the size of the globe, for example, unilateral high myopia or ophthalmos can present as pseudoproptosis. In the second example, you can see this is a case of a craniosynostosis in which you have a premature closure of the cranial sutures leading to shallow orbit and it fails to accommodate the normal globe, causing proptosis. And in other cases like contralateral enophthalmos in post-traumatic blood fracture, you can present as a pseudoproptosis of the normal eye. And even in contralateral ptosis, you can have an ipsilateral upper lid retraction, which can mimic proptosis. So a complete and precise history is very important to come to proper diagnosis. Most important is the age of onset of proptosis. For example, if the child is presenting with proptosis since birth, you need to consider in terms of congenital cystic eyeball, teratoma, or meningocele or encephalocele. Whereas coming to the course, whether the proptosis is rapidly progressive or is it slowly progressive, if you see a history with a rapidly progressing proptosis, you need to think in terms of infectious inflammatory pathology or a malignant tumor, or even in case of a pre-existing lymphatic malformation, you can have chocolate cyst presenting acutely. Then you need to ask about the associated symptoms of proptosis, like is it associated with pain? Again, which gives us a clue in terms of infectious and inflammatory pathology as well as malignant tumors. Sometimes even benign tumors can present with pain because of hemorrhage within the lesion. Then you ask about whether the vision is hampered or not. That indicates the compression of the optic nerve by the mass, or it can also indicate astigmatism induced by the mass directly indenting on the globe. Then you ask about whether the patient is having double vision as well as squint. That indicates thyroid ophthalmopathy or a mechanical obstruction of the globe because of the enlarging mass itself. Then you ask about whether the proptosis is increasing on bending forward or on straining. That indicates a vascular malformation. Then you ask about whether the proptosis is intermittent, again indicating a vascular malformation. Especially in children, you can ask whether the globe enlarges or if there is proptosis on crying, indicating a meningocele or encephalocele. Then you ask about the medical history, especially thyroid disease, since it is the most common cause of unilateral or bilateral proptosis in an adult. Then you ask about diabetes, very important if you see an adult patient coming with acute proptosis, it can be a case of an invasive orbital mucormycosis in an uncontrolled diabetic patient. Then you ask about tuberculosis or any systemic cancer to rule out mets to the orbit. Then you ask about the family history of cancer and neurofibromatosis. Coming to the inspection, you need to look for the facial symmetry. Like in this patient, you can see there's a fullness in the temporal fossa with narrowing of the horizontal aperture. This is a case of a this is a case of a dermoid cyst. And you can also come across fullness in the temporal fossa in cases of sphenoid wing meningioma and metastatic neuroblastoma. Then you look for the position of the globe. There are two views. One is Navziger's view, in which you ask the patient to sit on the chair and you go behind the patient and look the patient's eyes from above to look for the asymmetry. And then other way is the Worm's view, in which you look at the patient's eyes from down to look for asymmetry. Axial proptosis is when the eye is displaced straight outwards along the anterior-posterior orbital axis. It is most commonly seen in thyroid ophthalmopathy and intracranial lesions such as cavernous hemangioma, optic meningioma, optic neuroglioma. Whereas abaxial proptosis is when the eye is pushed forward and also displaced off its central axis. It is commonly found in extracorneal tumors. Like for example, in this case, you can see there's an inferior temporal dystopia which is mainly because of the lesions in the superior nasal quadrant, such as rhabdomyosarcoma, meningocele, encephalocele, can present with inferotemporal dystopia. This is a case of an inferior dystopia, that is because of the lesion in the superior orbit. For example, you can have schwannoma or lymphoma presenting in this quadrant. Whereas inferonasal dystopia is because of the lesion in the superior temporal quadrant. That's why we have the lacrimal gland. So any lesion of the lacrimal gland, be it benign, malignant, or inflammatory pathology, can present with inferonasal dystopia. Then superior dystopia could be because of the lesion of the maxillary sinus, such as squamous cell carcinoma of the maxillary sinus, eroding into the orbit and pushing the globe up. Then you need to look for the periorbital fullness. Like in this example, you can see there's a fullness in the superior sulcus, indicating a mass in the superior orbit displacing the globe downwards. Then you look for the skin changes. In this example, you can see that the skin is very tense, shiny, and red, indicating an infectious pathology like orbital cellulitis. Or you can find yellowish discoloration of the skin in xanthogranuloma. The tumor surface, we look for the prominent vessels, whether you can see whether the tumor is smooth, or you can see multinodularity of the lesion in case of recurrent pleomorphic adenoma, or if it is a rapidly progressing malignant lesion, can also present with bleeding or ulcer. And you should look for the dilated tortuous vessels over the mass as well. Valsalva maneuver is important in case of especially high flow vascular malformation and orbital varix. You ask the patient to close the nose and the mouth, and or you can ask the patient to bend forward and measure the size of the lesion, or you can measure the amount of proptosis before and after Valsalva maneuver to look for any change. This is a case of a pulsatile proptosis. You can see the patient is also having multiple neurofibromas on the skin. It is a case of a neurofibromatosis with with a sphenoiding dysplasia leading to transmitted pulsation into the globe, causing pulsatile proptosis. Pulsatile proptosis is also seen in cases of high flow keratocavernous fistula. Then very rarely you may come across something called as chewing oscillopsia. This is a case of a dumbbell dermoid in which you can see there's an extraorbital component as well as intraorbital component. Whenever the patient is chewing, there's a contraction of the temporalis muscle pushing the extraorbital component into the intraorbital component and causing chewing oscillopsia. Chewing oscillopsia can also be seen in extensive removal of lateral orbital wall as well. Then in the eyelid, very important to look for the signs of thyroid eye disease, since it is the most common cause of proptosis in adults. We look for the signs of lid lag, lid retraction, or lateral flare. In a case of a neurofibromatosis or lacrimal gland lesions, you can come across an S-shaped deformity of the upper eyelid. Or if it is a very long-standing lesion, you can see increase in the vertical lid height as well. And in some cases, like metastatic neuroblastoma, you can have recurrent ecchymosis of the eyelid as well. Extraocular movements, very, very important. So, for example, in this case, you can see there's cysticercosis of the superior rectus LPS complex leading to limitation of elevation. Extraocular movement will be restricted even in case of thyroid eye disease or any mechanical obstruction to the movement of the eyeball by an enlarging mass, or direct compression of the cranial nerves can also cause extraocular movement restriction. Conjunctival or fornical examination, and this you can see a bluish discoloration of the superior fornix indicating an underlying vascular malformation, or you can come across a solid chemosis in the case of a metastatic neuroblastoma, or you can come across something like purplish reddish lesion in the superior fornix seen in orbital varix, or you can see in an elderly patient with a pinkish mass in the inferior fornix indicating lymphoma. And also, you should carefully look for dilated tortuous corkscrew vessels in the conjunctiva, which is seen in high flow keratocavernous fistula, or chemosis in a case of rapidly expanding tumor or a chocolate cyst in a lymphangioma. Exophthalmometry is very, very important. It measures in an anterior-posterior plane the distance between the apex of the cornea and a bony point. It is usually taken to be the deepest portion of the lateral orbital margin with the eye looking straight ahead. There are usually three types, which is absolute exophthalmometry, in which the amount of proptosis is compared to a normal standardized value. Comparative proptosis, in which the amount of proptosis is measured in the same eye compared from time to time, and relative exophthalmometry, in which the amount of proptosis is compared between the two eyes. Hertel's exophthalmometer is the most commonly used instrument to measure the amount of proptosis. In this, the patient and the examiner should be at the same level. You ask the patient to close the eye and locate the orbital notch on the temporal side of both the orbit. The separation, so basically Hertel's exophthalmometer has two foot plates. One is fixed, the other one is sliding. So the separation of these two should be kept constant in subsequent visits to avoid errors. Then you have two red lines on the exophthalmometer. It should be in line with each other to avoid parallax. Then vertical displacement is measured by using two scale method, in which a horizontal scale is placed along the lateral canthus of two orbits, and a vertical scale is used to measure the distance from the horizontal scale to the 6 o'clock limbus. And you take the difference of the two eyes, that will give you the amount of vertical displacement. Whereas horizontal displacement, you take a mark on the center of the nasal bridge and you measure the distance uh, from that mark to the nasal limbus of each eye, and the difference between the two measurements will give you the amount of horizontal displacement. Then you have Lutz exophthalmometry. It's a simple single transparent plastic ruler which is having reading on both the sides to avoid parallax. It has 0 to 40 millimeter reading. It's very useful, especially in children. They will not get intimidated by this since it's a very simple plastic ruler. Then you have Nobel's exophthalmometry. It is slightly different from Hertel's exophthalmometer. It rests on the superior as well as inferior orbital rims. It doesn't require lateral orbital rims, so it can be used in cases where there is fracture of the lateral wall of the orbit, and it also measures globe dystopia along with axial proptosis. So palpation, you start with the orbital rim to look for any deformity. Then you relax the orbital septum by asking the patient to look up and feel for any mass. You locate the mass and measure the extent and look for the border of the mass. Look whether the mass is fixed to the underlying bone. Look for local rise of temperature or tenderness, which can indicate an infectious or inflammatory pathology. Look whether the surface is smooth or nodular, consistency, whether it is firm, soft, or hard. Look for any deformity of the surrounding bone indicating erosion because of the rapidly progressing tumor. Then you do a retropulsion test, in which you ask the patient to close both the eyes and you use your thumb to push the globe gently backwards and look for whether the lesion within the orbit is compressible or not. Then you look for the pulsations of the tumor or on the globe. You can find pulsations in AV malformation, or if there is any bony defect in case of neurofibromatosis, like an absence of a sphenoid wing meningioma. Then auscultation again will help us to find out keratocavernous fistula, in which you can hear a buoy over the eyeball or over the bone. Other very important examination in the case of a proptosis is measuring the visual acuity. So visual acuity can be hampered because of astigmatism due to direct indentation of the globe by the mass. It can be because of optic nerve compression. It can be because of a central retinal vein occlusion or central retinal artery occlusion, or even exposure keratopathy because of massive proptosis can cause diminution of vision. Pupil reaction again indicates optic nerve compression if you find RAPD. Then cornea examination to look for exposure keratopathy. Carefully examine the iris to look for lesion nodules that is seen in neurofibromatosis again. Then fundus examination is important, especially in the case of an optic nerve sheath meningioma. You can come across optociliary shunt vessels, or in any intracorneal tumors which is directly compressing the optic nerve can present with disc edema or CRUO, or if the mass is indenting on the globe, you can find chorioretinal folds as well. So color vision, contrast vision, and visual field is very, very important, especially if the patient's vision is normal and you are suspecting any optic nerve compression. These three will help us in documenting preoperatively, and then diplopia charting and Hess charting to document the extraocular motility as well as double vision. Systemic examination, especially in the case of a neurofibromatosis, you look for other signs like cafe au lait spots. Lymph node examination, you have must do in the case of a malignant tumor to rule out local spread, and you look for a generalized lymphadenopathy in the case of a lymphoma. Respiratory system is examination is important to rule out CA lung. Abdominal examination is important if you are suspecting mets from neuroblastoma. Coming to investigation, the commonly done investigation are the CT scan, ultrasound, and MRI scan. So, an axial sagittal coronal cuts of orbit, head, and paranasal sinuses are very essential for evaluating the exact location, extent of the lesion, and also planning for the surgery. So, CT scan will give us a relationship between the orbital mass and the surrounding bones, whether there is any erosion or defect within the bone. It will give us a relation between the orbital mass and the optic nerve, whether the mass is medial to the optic nerve or lateral to the optic nerve to decide on the plan. And also, it gives a relationship uh, uh, between the paranasals, and sometimes we have lesions arising from the paranasal sinuses and eroding into the orbit. And also, we can come to know whether the lesion is encapsulated, well defined, and circumscribed, and which can be easily resectable. Or if it is diffuse, you need to do debulking or incision biopsy. Contrast again will give us an information about the vascularity, whether it is highly vascular. If it is highly vascular, you need to prepare blood transfusion as well in that case. Ultrasonography is
Thank
a
you,
good uh,
Amir.
ultrasonography is a good adjunct to CT scan. So this will give information about whether the lesion is solid or cystic, whether it is heterogeneous or homogeneous. Like in this case, lymphangioma, you can see macrocysts with septae in between. And MRI finally is very, very important if you are looking for a lesion within the orbital apex, or if it is an optic nerve tumor like optic nerve glioma or optic nerve meningioma. This will give a better information than a CT scan. So then you have incisional or excisional biopsy that will help us in diagnostic circumstances. Then FNAC is also an important diagnostic test, but you should know when to avoid, like pleomorphic adenoma, hydatid cyst, or a Dahmer cyst. Peripheral blood smear again is very important in children to rule out leukemia. And there are other tests that you need to do, like thyroid function test or other markers to rule out systemic granulomatosis diseases as well. Thank you.